Hotep. All right. Hotep, Hotep, Hotep. Welcome once again to the Malefe Kete Asante Institute, 5535 Germantown Avenue. I like to say the mecca of Afrocentric consciousness in the world. Thank you to Dr. Malefe Kete Asante for providing this great space and honor and all those who come and support the Institute. You know, I'm just happy to be here again and good to see you all. Give yourselves a hand. Yeah, there you go. Today we got a special guest. Oftentimes, you know, people say we're so distracted. There's a game called Whack-A-Mole. You ever play that game? I call it meaningless obstacles lying about everything. That's what we see. We see a lot of moles out there today, you know, and every time, you know, you gotta but oftentimes when you're looking at the new thing of the moment, you're not focused on something that actually might have more impact on your future and your people, right? I said, if you know more about Donald Trump than you do about Ibrahim Traore, I said, we in trouble, right? But they shoving Trump in our face like one of them, you know, one of them clocks they hypnotize people with, right? Everything he does wrong, I was going to say right, but everything he does wrong and wrong some more. So today we have a recentering. Dr. Asante calls it being located, right? Being centered in our own historical narrative, our own cultural narrative. And that's one thing that the Institute stresses. That's one thing Afrocentricity stresses. So if you're watching for the first time, this is a great introduction to the type of information we give at the Institute. Because despite what you hear in the mainstream media, these are the types of issues that you should be focused on and should be thinking about, especially if you're thinking about the liberation of African people. Right. So from his MA and BA at San Jose State to another MA and PhD at Temple University, I bring to you a man that is going to tell you why Africa is so much more important than anything that Donald Trump or ICE or anybody else is doing in the world. I bring to you Dr. Zizwe Poe. Hear ye him, put your hands together.
Hotep. I am so glad to be here. As a matter of fact, this is a presentation that's part of a series. But before I can even go into this third episode of the series, I first have to do what everyone always has to do when they come to a situation and an organization like this to present a message is give Dobali to all the generations and organized contributors that come before us and who are here with us now. I want to give thanks particularly to the Malefe Kete Asante Institute, an example and a model of which way we can take the struggle forward. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that this institute multiplies thousands of times because we need this to prepare our next generation for the struggle of this war that we're in. So again, thanks to the MKA Institute, thanks to the activist ancestors that we have many of, and thanks to all of my familial ancestors and my current family, which I'd like to right now just give a second to recognize Professor Poe, who's in the audience, who has been my partner in development and revolution for more than 4 decades, moving close to our 5th decade, yes. And also I'd like to thank you, because you could have been doing something else, though this is probably the most important thing to do. But I thank you for being here. And I would like to give thanks to a recent department that I've been a member of for about a year now, called the Pan-Africanist Studies Department at Lincoln University. And I'm telling you, it was a war to get to it, but we now have it. And we're going to do some things that I'm going to share with you today to upgrade the previous episodes of this series. Finally, I would like to give thanks to the warriors of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Now, I have to take just a second to ask, how many of you have ever been in the work study circle of the All African People's Revolutionary Party? Look, I got 2 or 3, 4, 5. And that's my main point with today's presentation. This presentation is an upgrade of a presentation I gave here in 2024, but it focuses primarily on the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because I believe the All African People's Revolutionary Party will have a different rendition of what it served, the purpose it served originally. And I'll tell you that in just a minute. So what I learned when I was in school at Temple is that before you present, you make sure you share your assumptions with the audience so that they don't just have to keep asking you about that. My first assumption that I want to share with you is that humanity is at war, and it's the war between the people's class versus the anti-people's class. Now, I know some of you, when you hear this class struggle, you may run to a dogmatic approach of Marxism, but I'm telling you something that comes out of the African Revolution itself, a consciousness the fact that there's a people's class and an anti-people's class. This kind of class notation, for those of you who may have studied Marx, is not necessarily directly a, how do you say it, historical materialist outlook. Because if you've ever studied Marx, he says that classes are come into existence because there are interests that are trying to be protected, usually by private capital, private profit interest. But during the time of the liberation movement of the 1950s through the 1970s, there came some documents produced by an organization called the Parti Democratique du Guinée, or the PDG of Guinea. Guinea was a close relationship to Ghana at the time that these two states were actually leading the Pan-African Revolution, even bringing in Mali and then later on Congo. So you hear about AES today. If those of you who don't know about AES that may be listening out on the line, the states of the Sahelian region coming together to strengthen the fight for their people. So back in these days when Nkrumah and Touré were talking, Nkrumah and Sékou Touré were talking, the concept of class struggle came up. But if you know anything about Guinea and Sékou Touré, it's a deeply Islamic society. And what they did is they tried to express a concept of the people's class. Now, I don't know many revolutionaries that use this concept, but it's a clear idea that Nkrumah and Touré were able to bring up. Because Nkrumah defined in his book called Class Struggle in Africa, that a class in its final summation is a bunch of people brought together to protect certain interests that they perceive as their interest. So even if you were a doctor or a lawyer, you could work with a farmer or a miner or whatever to represent the interest of the people. So this is called the people's class. And so when you say that there's a people's class, the next question comes up is, well, who's the enemy? The enemy is the anti-people's class. Then when you begin to try to define the parameters of these classes, you see what these organizations and these peoples do for the benefit and the interest of the African masses, not just the elites, not just your successful lawyers and your successful doctors or artists or what have you, but for the masses of African people. And this is what we want to center our focus on. So my first assumption, as I said, humanity is at war, the people's class versus the anti-people's class. You don't have to look far to find this war. You can look in Palestine, you can look in Sudan, you can look in West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, Central Africa, or right here where President Trump is the leader of the country. Second assumption, the current struggle is about liberating our cultural institutions and especially the ideological ones. That's why I praise the MKA Institute. These are two major assumptions. And to give you my summation, I always give my summation because I talk too long. My summary is we need to continue to build these independent institutions so that our next generation is ready to carry on the revolution. I'm here with my generational partners. I see a lot of you in here that I've seen for at least 2 decades. Matter of fact, me and Mr. Sudan in the back, we were in Egypt together how many years ago? It's not 20 yet. No, it's more than 20, in 2006, close to 20 years ago, that we were in Egypt together. And other people I've traveled with here and come and spoke with at these different places and locations. So the main point I wanted to do is show that I wanted to first give the Dobali and then give an introspection. So this introspection is going to be a little bit about my life. I hope not to bore you. I'm going to try to do it real quick, okay? So some 45 to 46 years ago, I learned about the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The way it happened is I was sitting in something called a Finley Lounge at CCNY, City College of New York in Harlem. And I was sitting there just vibing like with all other students. We weren't really serious about our education, but we were all trying to avoid the Vietnam War. And so we were there. We were able to get in. We were able to avoid it. And we were kind of vegetating in that lounge as students often did in that era. And then what I thought was a crazy man came in and began moving chairs around, brought a podium like this around and began to talk to us. And I didn't really know who he was. I had heard some things he had done, but I didn't know it was this one person. And that person is a person we call named Kwame Ture, who took his name from Kwame Nkrumah and Sékou Touré. But some of us may know him as Stokely Carmichael. So he came in the room, he started moving the podium, and all the people in the lounge that was kind of, some of them were half here, some of them were half gone because of the things we did in the 1970s. And he came in and started talking about this land belongs to the Native Americans. I'm an African and I'm fighting for Africa. Now that made a hell of a lot of sense to me And I hadn't thought about it before. I was beginning to think of myself as a U.S. citizen and not really anything. What in Africa what does that have to do with me? I mean, I was studying blackness and stuff, but I didn't really know about African revolution. And he invited us to African Liberation Day the next day, which was in Washington, D.C. How many of you have been to African Liberation Day? You mean there's some that have not? Okay, yes. It used to be gigantic at the time. There was a group called the African Liberation Support Committee. There's a bunch of organizations that were coming together, and they were all talking some aspect of Pan-Africanism. But Kwame Ture was bringing us the organization that Kwame Nkrumah had created as his second political party. Some people know about the Convention People's Party, which was Nkrumah's party in Ghana, but don't realize that Nkrumah created a second political party that had the scope of the whole globe. It didn't just talk about Africa's independence, but it talked about the independence of the globe, specifically African continent becoming a nation. So Nkrumah, through his consciousness, as he evolved on the Pan-African path, moved from just looking at Ghana as the seat, the base of his operations, to looking at Africa as a whole as the base of his operations. As a matter of fact, when the CIA overthrew him in 1966 and his government, he went to Guinea and became the co-president of Guinea. So this information is out there. The problem is that it's not often taught, even in our Africano programs. So there's a battle for us inside of our own noosphere, inside of our own mentality, to win over our programs, to prepare our students, not just for a damn job, but to prepare them to be the leader of the next element of our revolution. And they come in. I mean, they have skills we don't have in my generation. Social media skills. I can name off things like Snatch and X and Twitter. I don't use any of them, but these youth use it, and they're using it in a scholarly way. Hugh, how you doing, brother? I'm sorry I had to interrupt just for a minute, because this is a longtime educator of African values, and he works with our youth at an institution located here in Germantown called Lotus Academy. And if you got some grandchildren or whatever, and you need them to keep learning how to respect the elders and talk to them in the proper way. And when I was there, when my wife taught there, was one of the master teachers there, they were teaching our children Medu Neter, which is the hieroglyphs, and Kiswahili, and just the value system that they taught there is what helped a lot of even our children, some of my children, to mature into folks that had a positive vantage point. And this is what I'm pushing here today. The whole thing, the summary, like I said, we need to take our organizations and liberate our institutions. Now, some people talk a lot about decolonization. I don't really use the term, because to me, the term decolonization, again, centers colonization. So to me, it's about being free from all of that and to use our cultural values, which we have put together over thousands of years. Now, some of you who may have read what I've written know that my major scholarship area is in the area of Kwame Nkrumah. So I have like two major areas that I do research in. One is Pan-African nationalism. So that's how Kwame Nkrumah comes in. And the other is Kemet and historical realities for Africa. Matter of fact, I have a gem I want to drop on you, but this is going to have to be 2026 presentation about what came before Kemet. And what does it mean to look for a classical reference? If I said that we're in a war between the people's class versus the anti-people's class, this war is about as old as it goes to Kemet. Yeah. Once we have to start, now we have to talk more about what happened further south on the Nile, which is what gave rise to Kemet. Okay. But we're so busy having to just tell you a little bit about Kemet. Oh, I'm sorry. Some of the audience may not know. Kemet is the original name for what they call ancient Egypt. And the reason why it's important that we look at Kemet as our classical reference is because we need to understand that there was even class struggle inside of Kemet. And if you can read the literature, this is why I encourage people to learn how to read Medu Neter. If you can read the literature, you'll see it. Now, let me show how that's connected to the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Like I said, I was sitting in that lounge, just relaxing. And then Kwame Ture invited us to the African Liberation Day celebration, and I went. Man, I was amazed. There's a park in DC that we call Malcolm X Park. And it was loaded from one end to the other end. At the front end, there were Palestinians, Iranians, Africans from different liberation movements all over, especially Southern Africa at the time, Namibia, Mozambique, and South Africa, and their fight against apartheid. We had these sessions that were going on in the park, and people were dressed in all white. It was amazing at one end of the park. When you went to the other end of the park, there were dancers, drummers, And the whole town was like, it wasn't in DC anymore. It was in a freed Africa for that one day at least. So I was interested in the organization, and they had these forms to fill out if you want to be a member. So I filled out my form, sent it in, and no response ever came back until I moved to California a few years later. And then I joined a chapter of the AAPRP in California. And at least as far as I see it, we was like the baddest chapter in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which was kind of oxymoronic since the party wasn't in the AAPRP California chapter was not in Africa. So it was kind of oxymoronic that you had these real pro-African, pan-Africanists in California running around on all the college campuses doing what we were assigned to do. And that was to call every Black person an African. Hey, African, how you doing? I did it a lot of times. Only one time I stopped when this big brother said, you call me that again, I'm gonna kill you. I said, I have to move on, come back to him later on. But we went around getting people to re-identify with Africa, even if they knew nothing about Africa. We wanted to let them know the greatness about Africa because, again, we were preparing and recruiting them to come to the organization and give their life to the struggle for Pan-Africanism. Again, I was young, a little dumb and naive. I thought it would be over by the time we were 26 or 27. But then it didn't quite finish. Matter of fact, Nkrumah had been writing about neocolonialism. I wasn't quite aware of what neocolonialism was, but neocolonialism was re-grasping Africa just while we were struggling to liberate it. We became wiser later. But the thing that the AAPRP offered us was it saved us from becoming apologists for the system. Because, you know, in colleges, that's what they really prepare our students to be. I have to share that with my students sometimes. I tell them about things that happened. By the way, I teach in Pan-Africanist studies. So I tell my students about things that happened in the past and how the civil rights peaceful movement eventually became frustrated and becomes a Black power militant movement in different levels. And I said, and even the people who weren't in any of these movements or organizations became so frustrated with the way they were being treated in the US that they were burning down cities. We went from slave rebellions to urban rebellions. And when we did this, and the students like sit on the edge of their chairs, because somehow in high school, they don't tell them this. So they're sitting on the edge of their chair and they're saying, wow. And I said, and that's right. And right now, you're the ones that they're preparing to go tell the rebels when they rebel that they should stop burning their own community. And then they're going to start looking at you like maybe we should burn you first. And in fact, you know, they get a little nervous, but in fact, that's what they're training the students to be, apologists, because, you know, you live on the hill, your stuff is nice, but where they have you working is in the hood. So, I mean, even though I'm using a model of something that happens in the US that you're familiar with, this happens on the continent. You know, our skilled scholarly activists get so seduced by European culture or African benefits that they stop serving the masses. So this is one of the things that we in the AAPRP fought against. But the thing that really attracted me to the AAPRP once I got in is the school that they had. They had something called a work study circle. It means you don't just study, you got to work. And it's a circle, an unbroken circle. It was 5 to 13 people. We used to read 5 pages a day, come together every 2 weeks, have a 5-hour meeting. Yes, as students, and we weren't even required by our teachers, but we're required by our consciousness, and the organization required it. So even before you could become a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, you had to serve in this process for 5 years. You had to study political education, you had to study contemporary geopolitical events, and you had to study organizational science. These were the 3 things that you studied each time you met. And there was no Christmas break or anything like that. You did this like you were going to church. As a result, we became the kind of students that all the teachers wanted. And the chapter that we had in California became the biggest chapter in the AAPRP. There was a central committee. The way the All African People's Revolutionary Party was organized is that it had chapters and it had regions, and then it had a central committee. The central committees were like the oldest members of the party. They joined from some of them came from SNCC, some of them came from the Black Panther Party, some of them came from liberation struggles on the continent. And they were usually united through connections in Ghana and in Guinea. They would bring us together and we would organize to try to advance the Pan-African Revolution and to make sure that all people who were Black recognized themselves as Africans. We had a political education process that was designed for undergraduates, which was cool until they graduated. People started getting jobs. And they said, well, I really can't do that AAPRP stuff too much. And depending on their job, they might not even be able to say they were in an AAPRP. So there were a few of us that stayed into the academic arena and were able to figure out how to manipulate our position in the academic arena such that we'd be able to do AAPRP activities and in some sense sabotage the enemy curriculum that we were facing daily. And this is what we did in the AAPRP. And so before I came, because the title of this presentation is about the AAPRP personalities and other things, you probably have seen it. Before I came, I told my wife, who also shared this experience with me, that I had to come and tell you that the AAPRP was actually a tool of a Pan-African strategy. And I thought I should share some of the strategy. The AAPRP was an idea put together by Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, like I said, as he was overthrown by the CIA in Ghana. He had actually written this book in 1966, but when 65 to 66, when the coup d'etat came from the Central Intelligence Agency, they stole a manuscript for it, and he went to Guinea, and he republished a book in 1968 called The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, and in that book, it gave a strategy for what Nkrumah saw as the All African People's Revolutionary War. You may have never seen that term, but Nkrumah saw, as the result of being a president of a country that he was pushing toward Pan-Africanism, that the end of this battle was going to be an all African People's Revolutionary War. Nkrumah didn't love war, but he recognized war was coming. And he said in order to win it, the liberation movements at the time, and he constantly told them this, needs to unite and form what he later would call an all-African Committee for Political Coordination. So you would have like SWAPO from Namibia, MPLA from Angola, Frelimo from Mozambique, ANC and PAC from South Africa, the Jamahiriya from Libya. All of these different entities that were fighting against colonialism were to come together and become a core of the willing entity that would eventually become the United States of Africa. I gave that presentation in 2023 here about the United States of Africa. So if you want to know more details about it, it's on the MKA Institute website. So check that out. So this was the push that was going on at the time. The AAPRP was supposed to be a propaganda organization that would unite these liberation movements to work together so that they could form this All-African Committee for Political Coordination, who would then give rise to an All-African People's Revolutionary Military. He called it Army in that book, the AAPRA. So the assumption for Nkrumah after his life experience was that we were going to have to be organized on a massive level throughout the continent to empower the masses of people. And this is what I joined it for. And I stayed in it. I became a member of the Political Education Committee and eventually became the coordinator for a while in the California chapter of Political Education. Again, I said it was an undergraduate education. So we only gave enough political education to go recruit some more undergraduates to the organization. We didn't really do the deep study that I learned from until I came to Temple. I mean, in terms of my experience, when I came to Temple and began to merge Afrocentric scholarship with the scholarship that we were getting from our curriculum as a work study circle, I began to go deep, deep, deep. And I even finished my book on Kwame Nkrumah's contribution to Pan-Africanism, which later on, even the All-African People's Revolutionary Party cadre read. Because I dealt with some history that they didn't have time to deal with because we were really just getting enough information to go recruit people to the organization. But you can't stop there. I mean, Sekou Touré writes about this, that if you have a political education program, but you stop, it becomes worse with the population you were giving it to than if you've never gave it to it, because now they become immune to your messages. So I became an educator. I was already an educator, but I became an educator with a task to sabotage enemy curricula. Any curriculum that I saw was making my population forget that they were Africans, I would attack it with information and knowledge and show how what they were learning was ridiculous. And this is what I began to do after I finished with the great reawakening and even, I could say, self-improvement as a revolutionary that I got from the Temple program. I was able to go and become a faculty member. Check out what the ancestors did. I became a faculty member after I graduated from Temple University at the same institution that Nkrumah graduated from for his Bachelor of Arts. And then as I began to research more, I found out that he was convinced to go there by Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first president of Nigeria. And I said, whoa, how did I get here? It's like the ancestors just put me in that place. And I was there and I stayed, got tenure. I've been there for 25 years. Yeah. And we are sabotaging enemy curriculum and producing a more progressive curriculum. Matter of fact, we just had a major victory a year ago where the Pan-Africana program became a department. But I got to tell you this about Lincoln University. It's the oldest degree granting university in the United States for people of African descent. Well, I have to share this. Recently, I've been sharing this everywhere. There's no people in the world that's not of African descent. But I'm talking about the Black ones, the ones who came recently from Africa, not the ones who've been gone so long that, all pigmentation is lost. This is what we do there. Now we have a department. We have 4 core faculty. Professor Poe is one of the members in that department. And for the first time, this is so deep. I was in the AAPRP all this time. By the way, All African People's Revolutionary Party does have an All African Women's Revolutionary Union. Both of the AAPRPs that exist. There's more than 2, but not the conversation here. There could be 1,000. That would be good. I don't care if they're just one right now, because if there was one, it'd make the CIA's job too easy. So more than likely, there's a bunch of these parties where I haven't met the people. That's all good. As long as they be following a similar strategy, at a certain point, we'll be brought together in this All African Committee for Political Coordination. Matter of fact, I'm even encouraging all of you to figure out some way to belong to something like that so that we can pull this together quicker. But my most important focus right now is how we work with your grandchildren and your children and your younger brothers and sisters and what have you, for those of you out there also. We have to figure out how to take over those institutions that format our children, whether they're educational institutions, religious institutions, social institutions. We have to figure out how to get back. The elders are needed there to give it a link on the battles we struggle for. A lot of people I'm looking at in the room right now were out there with me in African Liberation Day marches. We're part of that whole movement. But at some point, the enemy strikes back. The enemy strikes back with a vengeance. Just think about it. Think of every Pan-African revolutionary state you ever imagined, and look at how the enemy strike back. Let's start with Haiti. Let's start with Haiti, the first country in the world to outlaw slavery. And the enemy struck back such that for their freedom, they had to pay rent on their freedom for I don't know how long to France. And still suffering right now. Even those fighting to reorganize Haiti are now being classified as gangs. I talked about that here before too. I asked some people, I said, you need to go see who this barbecue dude is. All right. And if you look at it, and you look at it not just at the jaundiced view that the liberal left and the right wing look at, then you'll see that these people that are being called gangs in the neighborhoods that they control, they're not all the same kind. Some are anti-people gangs and some are pro-people gangs. So you can't just lump them together because they're militarily organized. But you have to have great information in order to determine what's the distinction. Okay, so that's Haiti. But the way that the enemy struck back after Haiti should scare you. Then there's Ghana. Ghana, a liberated zone that was, when Guinea kicked the French out, before AES and Mali and Niger and Burkina Faso kicked out the French, Guinea kicked out the French first, years ago. And the French were so pissed off when they got kicked out, they removed toilet seats and telephones from the walls and claimed, these are our phones, these are our toilet seats, we're not leaving you anything. What Ghana did right away, under the leadership of the Convention People's Party, which was under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, gave an $11 million loan, no interest, to Guinea so that it can continue to function and remain a strong state. That was real brotherhood, sisterhood, and the way that states could come together. And so again, like I said, they expanded out even to Mali later on. So Guinea became a very important part of the revolutionary environment for Pan-Africanism. And we studied these things. As a matter of fact, I remember, well, before I even talk about Guinea right now, Ghana, again, it was attacked in '66. People were killed and military coup was put there and the US was bragging about it. Sort of like how Hillary Clinton bragged when Gaddafi was killed. But they were doing it back then also. Bragging that they had taken over Ghana and put a military government in place that was not pro-people. So the enemy strikes back. This is the theme of this. Even Ethiopia, which was an honorary Pan-African power because it defeated the Italy when they first tried to invade, the enemy came back again in World War I, what they call World War I, the European Gang War I, and again invaded Italy. Invaded Ethiopia. Italy again invaded Ethiopia. So they keep coming back. Matter of fact, to go to a side note real quick, some of you, if you check contemporary news right now, you'll see that Ethiopia just finished their dam, a great dam for hydroelectric power and what have you. But the kind of problems that exist without Pan-Africanism is Egypt and Somalia want to attack Ethiopia because they built a dam. Why? Because the dam flows downhill and flows through Egypt. So Egypt is saying, yo, our water levels are dropping, this, that, and the other. But they didn't care about that when they built the, what's his name? The dam that they built in Aswan Dam. But they named it after Nasser. Yes, when they built that dam, they were concerned about not having a Pan-African perspective, by the way, but they were concerned about bringing electricity to Egypt. Had they thought about the Nile belongs to Africa, and if they worked as a collective, some of the stress and challenges we have now would not be hitting there. But again, the empire strikes back. And then Libya. Libya took a while to become Pan-African. First it was Pan-Arab, and then as Gaddafi, as Reagan said, we're going to close the airspace over Libya because we don't like their politics. Only Africans would violate the airspace. So after a while, Gaddafi said, yo, these must be my real homies. And he even went and blasted the Arabs in a meeting with Saudi Arabia, blasted them because of their stance toward Palestine and their stance toward Africa. He said, after a while, he made Pan-Africanism above Pan-Arabism in his worldview. And he began to talk about having an African currency. He'd been quoting Nkrumah. His people were quoting Nkrumah stuff. So the Nkrumah stuff was coming back alive. So Gaddafi had to die. Now you can go buy an African in Libya, like the slave days. That's how bad it is. When the empire strikes back, they strike back hard. But now we got to strike back. We got to raise a whole generation immune to the propaganda that they slide on us. Actually, that's like the core of my discussion today. I mean, my message. So anyway, let me just say this about the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. It was a good book. It's a small book. Matter of fact, I suggest you all read it. It's about 97 pages. It was written for the masses. It wasn't written for like a doctoral dissertation or anything like that. He was just straight up. He said, look, there's three groups we got to organize: the workers, the peasants, and the intelligentsia. He said, but we only organize the intelligentsia or the youth intelligentsia as a spark to the revolution, because it's really the masses that bring revolution. But the intelligentsia has the opportunity to reach into the masses and to share the knowledge that they come in, that's accessible to them. So the handbook laid out this strategy to prosecute the war. Things have changed since then, however. At the time that Nkrumah wrote the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the majority of the population on the African continent was still rural. These few years later, the majority now has crossed over to being the majority of population is urban. There's still a lot of rural, but a lot of the land has been used for different reasons. And a lot of people have moved into towns and cities. So some new approaches are necessary. Probably the first approach to think about is stop urbanizing. Sekou Touré used to write about this. He used to say that you lose stuff when you move from having the land underneath you. Because those of you who grew up like I grew up in New York City. I know people that lived in space. They couldn't understand the land argument. I mean, in space, 13th floor. What do you mean land? What do I need land for? I'm saying, so that whole idea, the organic connection between humans and the land disappears in some of those urban environments. Also, the support of culture, where you have multiple generations living close by each other, also has a problem of existing in many of the urban areas. So see, these are some of the problems that we'll face as we organize, but we have to still organize. And our population is more mobile now than it's ever been, which could be good, because those borders that they gave us at the end of colonialism were not borders that are workable. As you notice, I haven't talked too much about the United Snakes because I'm not really interested in them. I want you to assert this new identity. That identity tells you who's your inside group you want to focus on. So I'm focused on African people. I'm not anti-humans. I'm for African people, again, culturizing or fixing up humans. Because and this is not to say that all these problems we are facing are external. Because they can't even do you unless you got some internal folks colluding. That's how it happens, So the only way that we can strengthen ourselves, I think, to move to the next level of this struggle, again, is by infiltrating these institutions and doing some things I remember people used to do. Like when I was in California, there wasn't a whole lot of Africans there everywhere. I mean, LA had a good population, Oakland had a big population. But still, what the Africans would do that I knew they would form Saturday schools for their kids. And they would educate them as best as they can. They weren't all in the AAPRP, so they didn't necessarily get revolutionary education, but they got liberating education from the racism of the normal United States setup and what have you. So the churches, there were even churches I remember experiencing here in the United States that helped keep Africa alive. Some of you have heard of Wose Community Church, and also Bishop Stallings in New York. Some people may have known Brooklyn. We've had these elements that tried to take us home, to keep us free. But every now and then we would get entangled in this U.S. identity question and our foundational Black Americans and some other kind of things where there's some people who are Black that don't want to have anything to do with Africa. But I think that if you remove, they used to say that when, like, if you did something that was similar to your parents, they say, oh, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But if that damn apple rolled far enough, it could turn into a nut. Meaning that if you lose your connection to the tree base, you can go crazy. I ask my students, I have students, one thing about Lincoln has populations that's very global. So I have a lot of Nigerian students, Ghanaian students, Tanzanian students be in my classes. And I say they're Ghanaian and Tanzanian and whatever. They say they're from Brooklyn or from Staten Island or from New Jersey or Philadelphia. I said, where are your parents from? Oh, my parents are from Grenada and this one and that other place. So I'm saying, so you're the leaf on the tree, but all of a sudden the leaf doesn't want to claim the tree. And it's the leaf that fertilizes the roots. So they're not understanding the full circle of life that's necessary in order for us to win this battle. We are in a battle. Ever since we was kidnapped, we never resolved that battle. I asked my students, I said, so what did you lose tangibly in this slave debacle? They said, well, and they try to, sometimes they give me these abstract thoughts like freedom. I said, no, tangible. They said, oh, well, I guess my family, my language, the way I believed in God, my land. I said, so did you get any of that back in 1863, 1864, 1865? No, none. I said, you don't even have your name back. You see? So I said, so maybe you haven't been set free yet. That's the first thing you have to get them to realize. Then get them to imagine what it would be like to be free. So let me use that point to tell you what I teach them that I learned from the AAPRP. I tell my students at the college level what Pan-Africanism means in 2025. What Kwame Nkrumah said Pan-Africanism was, he said it was an objective that meant the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. But we have been all given a witchcraft effect when you say the word socialism. We're like, you mean no God? Everybody live in the same house? And they're really describing the US, but they think they're describing the socialist system because they haven't studied it. They don't know what it means and what have you. So I try to tell my students that they need to stay connected to their elders. And people have children here. The secret is your grandchildren. And let me say this, because children almost feel it's an opportunity to rebel against their parents. But the grandkids love you. You spoil them. You're supposed to, so that they listen to what you're telling them, because sometimes they're going to be your protection from your kids. Not always. Sometimes they're going to help lead your kids, because sometimes their parents will listen to them. So you can reach them sometimes through the grandchildren. But all of us who are grandparents know that the grandchildren are the magic, And so the institutions, the schools, like I mentioned, Lotus Academy, we need more independent schools. When I was coming through the AAPRP, we had many of them because the Black Power generation decided it's stupid for me to send my kids to these enemies. And we said, and then they came this trick. And my friend in the back can tell you about this trick. It's called charter schools. Because in order to have these private institutions where our children can be educated about their past in a good way and learn the right values for human life, you had to pay. Somebody got to pay. Everything costs here. And so the parents would struggle trying to pay, and they wanted their kids in those kinds of schools, but then the government said, hey, we'll give you a charter. And it can be African-centered schools, which meant usually for them a strip of kente cloth and a picture of maybe Malcolm, maybe Harriet. You know what I'm saying? And that was it, because the curriculum was back into turning them into United States citizens. And again, you're lucky my wife is here. She reminds me of these things. The 14th Amendment. I don't know if you know about the 14th Amendment. I said I've been teaching 25 years at Lincoln. I taught history, African-American history, and Pan-African studies. The 14th Amendment, I saw a YouTube short in which Dr. Greg Carr at Howard University was talking about a presentation that came at Howard where the speaker was talking about the 14th Amendment. And in discussing the 14th Amendment, I don't know how many of you know about 13th, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. People say they know it, but really they usually don't know it. 14th Amendment has 5 different parts to it. But the most important part about the 14th Amendment was putting the Confederates in their place and saying that the Confederates going to pay reparations. And it was basically talking about what it meant to be a citizen of the United States. So if you look at those 3 amendments, anybody ever heard of the Republic of New Africa? And of course, I'm in the generation where people would know about them. They wanted 5 states in the South, and they wanted to be independent of the United States. Their argument was that the 14th Amendment was the worst thing that ever happened to Africans, because now to advocate that made you an enemy of the state. We never think about that because we're looking at citizen rights. We should have all our rights and this, that, and the other. But what comes with those rights are responsibilities. And it's the responsibilities you don't always want. So you have to ask about it before you decide to take so-called rights, because they still don't even give you the rights, but they'll give you those responsibilities. And so the 14th Amendment is a question. Matter of fact, the whole thing, once you start looking at the Constitution with a critical mind, you'll be like, why am I teaching this? Why am I not teaching you about the 42 negative confessions of Kemet? And why am I not teaching you about the other policies that came up, the Nguzu Saba and all of these? Why am I not teaching you more about that than this phony piece of paper that they keep changing anytime they want, and they don't respect it? Besides, it's built on stealing the land of the indigenous peoples. Flash note. Right now, every year, the students used to ask me, well, Dr. Poe, you keep talking this African stuff. Who are you going to vote for president? You know, during presidential elections. I said, I know who I'm voting for. Who are you voting for? I said, Leonard Peltier. And they would all say, Leonard Peltier. Of course, now they got a device. So Leonard Peltier. I said, he's in jail. I said, what's he in jail for? Shooting 2 FBI agents. What did he shoot them for? Because they was coming back on his land, trying to take his land. So I only said that that was the preface to what I'm getting ready to tell you. Leonard Peltier was pardoned by Biden one of his last days, like the day he was grabbing all his papers and leaving the office. He left a pardon on the desk. And he pardoned Leonard Peltier according to, it's not really a pardon, it's really house arrest. But he did it because Leonard Peltier told him what to do. And there was so much pressure from every Native American nation on the continent pressuring Biden to do it. But the bottom line is he's out. And he's 82 is it? 81. And he's out. So next time presidential election come up, if it's still open, write him in, because it's his damn land. And all throughout his life, he stayed his fight on making sure that the indigenous people would get their land back. And when he was recently interviewed by Democracy Now!, when he was recently interviewed, he said, you know, the person who was interviewing him, what's her name? Amy Goodman? She was saying, well, you know, what do you think of, what was it like when you was in the 70s? He said, wait a minute. In the 60s, I was involved. It was us and the blacks inside the United States and other organizations. I remember going to, because I was in the AAPRP, I remember going to what they call this thing like where they put a whole country on trial, tribunal, sponsored by the American Indian Movement. Matter of fact, I went to Libya in 1990. It was illegal at the time because Reagan said nobody can go to Libya, but it felt ridiculous that Africans were told they couldn't go to Africa. Anyway, I went to Libya in 1990, and I went with the Native American movement, organization called WARN, Women of Red Nations, and their leader was Ernie Longwalker at the time, and they were connected with the AAPRP. They took a group, this is when Gaddafi was alive, it was the 20th celebration of the 20th revolution. So we went with them, and who else was involved? There were people internationally. I even had a chance to see Yasser Arafat. Some folks knew, young folks don't even know who Yasser Arafat is. Yasser Arafat was there, Daniel Ortega was there, and I was in Libya with Kwame Ture. Man, let me tell you, Kwame Ture had the deepest juice throughout Africa because they saw him as somebody who was a Black Power advocate, then changed his name when he moved to Guinea to have Kwame from Kwame Nkrumah and Ture from Sekou Touré, and he became a member of the Democratic Party of Guinea and joined their Central Committee. And he was around organizing Africans all over the world. They even arrested Kwame Ture in South Africa, but he was such a powerful figure because of the Black Power movement. Jesse Jackson and all of them got on the phone and got them to let him out of jail. Sorry, it wasn't South Africa, it was in Guinea. But there was a meeting going on in South Africa that Jesse Jackson was at and some others were at, and they put enough pressure on Guinea to actually have to let Kwame Ture out of jail. This is what happens when your people organize correctly. So these things are all part of my life experience. And again, the political education committee thing really came in handy when I was able to begin to teach students on a college campus and create a curriculum that was almost in spite of the campus itself. Like I said, Nkrumah and Nnamdi Azikiwe graduated from there. But again, the HBCUs in general were really schools that were set up primarily to try to get Africans who used to be enslaved to learn the skills to go back and be enslaved in another kind of way. It doesn't mean all of them was. Some people came, built industries, and some people really built independent, freedom kind of organizations. But you have to know that just going to college, take it from me as an experience, is not necessarily liberating. You have to see what the curriculum is. It's just like going to a restaurant eating. It doesn't mean the food is healthy. You know what I'm saying? And you don't want to eat too much junk food because then you get diabetes and die. And the education sometimes can do that kind of thing to your outlook. Well, there's a special acknowledgement I need to make right at this point, and I forgot to do it earlier. I meant to do it. One of my colleagues, another colleague beside my wife, is here, and that's Dr. Kennebrew, who is also currently the chair of the Human Services component at our graduate center and our undergraduate adult center in Philadelphia. And the reason why I'm mentioning her is she told her students that this was going on today. This is somebody trying to sabotage enemy curriculum, obviously. I'm going to be there to help you, but yes. And I think it's a good thing because it's a human service department. What better way to serve humans? You know what I'm saying? Than to elevate them and make them powerful. Other than that, then they just become part of the menu. And humans are getting served, but not served the way you want them served. So I think it's a great thing. We need more educators like her. I'm hoping that everybody here really, even once you leave today, we start these institutions. And if you know of one, support one. I am a member of the MKA Institute, have been since it began. I'll stay a member of it. I may join a couple more things as I re-energize. I don't retire because that sounds like being tired twice. But as I re-energize, I may join some more and help to start some more of them. So, I have a lot more stuff. I figure people are going to want to talk about AES, the Sahelian states. I figure some people are going to talk about Malema, and EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa. I'm hoping you have questions relative to that. I'd love to discuss it. And also, this again is my AAPRP regular personality. I want to discuss all the revolutions. I even want to discuss Haiti if we can get to that. Or if you have some other stuff that we want to reach, I want to reach that. But the bottom line I want to leave you with today, which is I told them I didn't want to do the whole talk for an hour. I want to talk just to let you know some of my experience with this All African People's Revolutionary Party. I'm hoping that you all create it. In other words, if you don't see it, create something like it wherever you are. Look at the goals of it. Again, its goals are to try to unite struggling Africans that are fighting for African power, global African power. That's what we're fighting for. And I think it's very important, if you could, to start it. If you have, if there's a school that's doing it and you can help out, donate some time. MKA Institute, for instance, this institution is a great thing for education and knowledge and freedom, and it costs also. So if you're not donating something to it monthly, just consider it something regular each month that you can donate to keep this institution alive, because this is a freed area. This is a liberated area in enemy hell zone. You've got to protect it to keep it alive. And my goal coming here today was really to make sure a few more members pledge monthly. I do. I know a couple of other people that do. I'm not naming anybody else out there. I'm not put you on the spot, but you need insurance, and this is the kind of insurance you need. Okay. But what I wanted to really do, so like I said, I have two other presentations I did here. I didn't want to repeat them over and over. I wanted to try to address it. I usually have the same audience coming out that got some good questions, and they usually don't have just questions. They usually have significant comments they want to make, and I wanted to allow some time. How much time do we have now? Okay. So, yeah, let's start the Q&A.
One hands. I just want to thank you for talking about those great Phi Beta Sigma men, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and yes, Mu Chapter, Lincoln University.
That's right.
Dr. Weezy Poe, you gave an excellent lecture.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Weezy Poe, you gave an excellent lecture.
Thank you, sir.
I have a comment for you. constant knowledge of what Pan-Africanism will mean to the masses is always good for the youth and the masses itself. When you stress that and the meaning of that, it always enriches and gives a foundation for the young and for the elders to stay with the program. Stay with the program. Sir.
Sorry. Thank you. You also reminded me of something I failed to say. I meant to say. I'll answer the question too. But Pan-Africanism 2025 means still total liberation of all of Africa from all kinds of parasites, natural and human. Total unification of the continent in a nation kind of way, not just like a confederation of different states, but a central agency. And finally, the term scientific socialism, to think about it, because they poison your mind with what socialism is, it really means the mass empowerment over political control and economic control. And the state usually operates as an apparatus. But that's what it means today. The people's class are in charge of the state of Africa. So I just want to say that that's the updated kind of goal of Pan-Africanism, is what it means. And thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, Dr. Sonia, Professor Poe, your lecture today. I have two questions.
Yes.
One is, what's the state of AARP now, and what's your opinion of Ibrahim Traore?
Those are two distinct questions. But here's my question about AAPRP. I know of at least two from when I was in the AAPRP that exist. They have slight differences, but it was like I was explaining to somebody the other day. The root in the tree of the Pan-African movement is deep and it's one. But as it rises up to meet the sun, it branches in different directions. So other organizations that you could even kind of say are heading in the same direction, besides the AAPRP GC, which that's the All African People's Revolutionary Party Guinea-Conakry model, the AAPRP International, which is one that adds Cabral to their thinking group. There's other groups like the Pan-African Federalist Movement, very important organization that's trying to achieve African unity by 2030. There also are organizations throughout the continent, like even you take the University of Ghana in Accra. They have an institute in that university, Kwame Nkrumah African Institute there. And there's some in other places. And as I look, because all of the AAPRP manifestations you can't find necessarily, because for reasons of safety, reasons of security, and even if I knew all of them, I wouldn't tell you on this medium. But the bottom line is, ain't enough of them. So I know I'm connected with those older two. I know the folks, but they're all getting old also. We need newer generations that can digest whatever it is we were putting out there and modify and update it to the current challenge. So let me just say, I know of two specifically where I know the people and know both of them, but I have to add the Pan-African Federalist Movement because I think that they've also picked up the ball and they're running in that direction. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Ibrahim Traore, yes. Okay, so this one runs into my studies also, because Nkrumah used to write, armies are supposed to stay in the barracks. But at that time, he was dealing with the success of having political states without using armies to get into them. But I believe with the existence of AFRICOM, which came in 2007, that it was an organized move to keep terrorists inside the African continent, to keep us fighting each other so that that the imperialist forces could come and take the resources and run. So I'm in love with Ibrahim Traore. I'm hoping that they don't kill him, or they're not successful in killing him. They've tried many times. Specifically, not just because it's not because he's a young militant who apparently is very smart also, but because he's in a land where he brought back a tradition of Sankara. So it's like these, usually what happens is the enemy comes back and then you're just in worse shape you were before you took that liberating move. But in this case, especially that they have that unity between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which, by the way, the imperialist forces are trying to get them to fight each other. You pay attention, you'll see it. I think that he is a hopeful beam of light for our youth. Now, if you compare him to Sankara, they have some differences. Sankara was Christian, Traore is a Muslim. Traore supposedly said he learned from the mistake of Sankara, because Sankara was killed by like his right-hand man. He said, and it was clear that this right-hand man was an enemy, Kamprori. But he let him live to his own demise. And Traore has mentioned this. He said, but he's not making that mistake. He said, if he see you an enemy, he's gonna treat you like an enemy. And that's something you learn because of the bad experiences in the past. The other thing, if for people who are doing serious research, you'll also find that between the three states, the quote unquote ethnic groups, I don't like to use the word ethnic because the word ethnic, if you follow its etymology, means heathens, but the so-called ethnic groups there, I believe Burkina Faso, one of them is primarily Yoruba, while the other is primarily Hausa. But I think majority of them, I believe are Yoruba. I believe that's Burkina Faso and Mali. But I think, I'm not sure. I have to check. But you should check as scholars. Two of the states are Yoruba and one is Hausa. And that's important because usually you think all you got to do is learn French to understand what they're saying. But if you ever check out, like I watched Chichani, who is the leader of Niger, speak in a conference. And he was speaking excellent French, very slow. I had my translate, Google, I could translate it. And then he stopped speaking that and spoke his local language. And the crowd was erupting and everything, but Google don't translate that. Yeah, Google ain't got that Africanized yet. Just like if you use AI to look up the AAPRP to answer the brother's question about what AAPRPs are out there, they haven't got a clue. All they did is they went and looked at the web page of AAPRP International and the web page of AAPRP GC, and that's all they can look at. But AI is not yet at the level of understanding African revolution. So you might try to use it, but all it's going to make you do is argue with it, because AI reflects the Eurocentricity of the dominant internet. And you'll see it. I mean, pick your question and ask it. Make sure it's something you really know about so you can see what it's wrong about. Yeah, that's the way to use it. But those are the AIs and Traore question. I hope I answered that. I think I want him to live long and stay, like PLO Lumumba said, stay committed to what he's trying to do for the people and not get sidetracked and what have you. Yes.
Dr. Poe,
Yes.
thank you for this. I'm very grateful for every time you come here, every time you educate us. My name's Nabila Bey. I have three quick questions. What's a better, they're not deep at all.
Okay.
What's a better term to use rather than ethnicity?
Yeah, nation.
Nation, okay. And I always wanted to read Kwame Nkrumah's dissertation. Do you know how I can access that?
Okay, so Kwame Nkrumah has an honorary doctorate. So you may not find a dissertation. But rather than a dissertation, the most important books to read by Kwame Nkrumah are Africa Must Unite, Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, Class Struggle in Africa, and then if you want to get really deep, Consciousism, the philosophical text.
Do you know how we can access Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare?
Believe it or not, it's in the library.
In the public library?
As long as nobody reads it, yeah.
Oh.
And even if not, you can go online and the Marxists put up a version of it that they sampled and put up for free, because that's their kind of their kind of philosophy. But I would say get your own hard copy, because theirs is online. But there should be some on. You can go probably a local library. If not, come to Lincoln. We have a copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I asked about the dissertation is because at the museum in Ghana,
Yeah.
they claimed he had a dissertation. You know, so ever since I went there, I've been wanting to read it.
Well, here's the story about his dissertation. He was at University of Pennsylvania in the graduate program, and they wanted him to write a gigantic ethnography on a small group of people, like they usually do. They didn't want to know something, but he wanted to write about the battle against colonialism and what they could do in Africa. And UPenn didn't want to hear it, so he cut out and left. Yeah. But he got his honorary doctorate degree. I think the first one he got was from Lincoln. Yeah, and he deserves it. But then again, to show you how scholarly he was, He took over the institutions that were at the college level in Ghana, and he also created something called the Winneba Institute, which was for political education, to make sure that his civil servants got that political education. It wasn't always as successful as necessary, because if it was most successful, the coup probably would not have succeeded. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
That was question 2, though. You said you had 3.
Well, that was 3, was the dissertation, the handbook, and what was the better word to use rather than that?
Yeah, nations. It's a better word than tribes also.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, for
Yes.
your informative class or lecture. So my point is related to Gaddafi, and as a person from Sudan, so the way in which you look at Gaddafi is completely different than the way we look at home. Because the other side that I know Gaddafi is, whenever he gives resources to a nation or a country, he introduces his green book.
Yeah.
So the resources are conditioned. It's not like he's coming in the village and building schools and hospitals. No. The first thing he does, he will build a mosque. And that mosque is conditioned with infusing Arabic culture and Arab identity. So regenerating African into different identity along the line, like that's what he does in Uganda, in South Sudan, in Tanzania. So for me as a person that realized his action in 1980s in Darfur, he armed Arab nomads group, giving them arm to invade African villages and take African lands. So as Sudanese, we got a different version of what you have for Gaddafi, because if you are conditioning your assistance or your help to me, that means after 50 years, you want me to look like an Arab, not to be an African in my cultural fabric. That's the point but thank you.
Okay. So I think that's valid. And I'm going to tell you, all of the Pan-African heroes and sheroes I mentioned all had some problems. I mean, but Gaddafi's stands out more because, like I said, he was originally Pan-Arabic. His model was Nasser at first. He followed that a long time. But like you mentioned, in the 1980s, the Gaddafi I dealt was in the 1990s, and even then he wasn't yet Pan-African. But like in his green book, when I landed in Tripoli, all I saw was these gigantic, because I'm aware of Arab racism. It's the same shit as white racism. Sorry, my language. It's similar to white racism. Because also they were colonizers and oppressors ever since they became intolerant solo theists, meaning that they say there's no God but Allah. So all that other stuff you talk about, you're just an infidel. I understand this. But I also seen, first, before I even go to Gaddafi, let me go to Nasser. Nasser was that way originally also. It wasn't until his association with Nkrumah that he became more aware of his African piece. Because even you check his writings, there's writings about quotes from Gamal Nasser. And it talks in his earlier stages when he was pan-Arab and trying to join the Ba'ath Socialist Party. And, like with Iraq and this. So right now, even that country is called United Arab Republic. Okay, that hasn't even changed. So I'm saying this kind of Arab outlook is what Gaddafi was raised in as a young soldier. But when he saw the Arab world not go past the no-fly zone that Reagan gave, they would not fly into Libya. They didn't take a chance. Only the folks from the southern part of the continent would fly into Libya. And then Libya began to give them free flights for the, what is it, when you go to the Hajj. So Libya was flying Africans from the southern part of Africa to the Hajj. And Gaddafi always had advisors. I remember the time when, after I went in 1990 and Reagan was beginning to give heat to Libya, that Gaddafi's advisors told him to disassociate himself with all of that African revolutionary stuff and try to make peace with the West. And he did try to make peace with the West. But what he didn't do, but it didn't really stop his no-fly zone. So he began to use his other set of advisors who said, you need to look to Africa. You need to read Nkrumah. And then you begin to see some of the things he was doing. But the things he was doing wasn't in that era you're telling me of the 1980s. And at that time, he was on an Arab trip. By the 1990s and the 2000s, he killed the OAU with the assistance of Africans so that he could create the African Union, because he said this thing is not really working, this OAU. He said we need to follow what Nkrumah is talking about. That's when we knew he had a different set of advisors. That's when he was talking about using the gold dinar to be a currency for all of Africa. That's when he gave 75% of the first he paid, not he, I'm saying he, but I mean Libya. Libya paid 75% of the cost for the first African satellite to be put in space. Nigeria paid 25%. But Libya had this crude, this clean oil, clean gas. You could almost put it in your car. That's how clean the oil was, at the high level oil that they had. And what he didn't do, I mean, because I do believe, I know the stuff you talk about, not only Sudan, he had problems with Chad also. But the one thing he didn't do is build a castle there, and his parents were the last to get a house built inside of Libya. So the way he treated his internal population, you had free schooling, free education. You were given $50,000 to get married. If you were going to grow a farm, they gave you $50,000. They had money, and he used the money to give it to the population. It didn't solve all the problem of Arab racism, though. But the thing that I say, I read the Green Book also because they gave the Green Book to everybody. Every revolutionary is going to give you the books. Sekou Touré had 20 books, thick ones. And then, like I just shared some of the Nkrumah books. But Gaddafi's book's real easy to read. It's the Green Book. You might look at it and say, this doesn't even make sense. Some of it does make sense. But he said that the blacks shall prevail. And they had these on billboards. But you know why he said the blacks shall prevail? Not because it's a good thing for the blacks shall prevail. He wasn't against it, but he was trying to tell people blacks out reproduce all of us. So they're going to prevail. So stop fighting it. And we're in Africa. So, but it took a long time for this young soldier who followed Nasser's direction first, and then later, after being dissed by Saudi Arabia specifically. Matter of fact, do you know who killed Gaddafi? Who helped take over Libya? Forget France. Do you know who it really was? It was Qatar. So that whole Arabian stuff, they was pissed at Gaddafi because Gaddafi blasted the Saudi family for abandoning Palestine and all of this in a big meeting. You can even see it on a video. It's a YouTube video you can see. They had this meeting. It was recorded a long time ago, but it's up. And so it's a different Gaddafi. The Gaddafi I'm talking about is the resurrected Gaddafi, okay? And interesting because Sudan is in a serious situation. Are there 3 or 4 Sudans now? You know what I'm saying? In terms of the constant fishing that happens. The other thing, and you gave me a chance to set the record straight. Ghana is not the first black independent country in Africa. Sudan was. It's just that at the time, they wasn't looking at themselves as blacks. That's something, even you could be the blackest, but if you ain't thinking yourself as black, that comes usually when you encounter some white racism or Arab racism. Then all of a sudden you're like, yo, it's okay to be black. And a bunch of the Arabs that were racist were blacks because it's the ideology that came with their movement as it was expanding. It's not true Islam. Islam doesn't automatically support racism. It's people that implement, just like Christians that implement racism. Christianity doesn't necessarily support racism either. None of these religions really do. I have a whole nother story about the Amen priesthood, but we ain't talking about Kemet today. People don't know that even the word you say at the end of your prayers came from a political group. You know, the Amen priesthood was a political entity in Kemet. Yeah. And now the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims at the end of all their prayers praise that priesthood. Amen or Amin, they say. Sorry, got off point. Amen. Oh, okay.
We have a question from Shezmu Patalman, who says, as a Pan-African, should one look to the future to continue their legacy in North America?
I don't have answers for North America today, except that Leonard Peltier is out of jail. I know you might want, I mean, I had to make a distinct decision not to delve into United States. It's sort of like what Dr. Jabali told us earlier. I can say this for the person who's asking the question, was it just North America or Canada?
Said North America.
Okay.
North America.
So there are a lot of Native Americans I think you should probably try to work with. I think that this is what we should do. I think Native Americans would welcome Africans here as they did in ancient times, but they're not going to welcome us by coming to take their land and put European doctrines on top of them. I'm on their side actually. So I don't know what your North American dream is right now. Stuff look like it's trouble, but don't worry about it. I mean, every empire in the past has had to end. Yeah. Look to tomorrow.
You are being compared to Stephen Coakley on online. It said, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, but I know Stephen Coakley had a doubt about organizations, but Stephen Coakley, I respected him. He was a great presenter in his life. Yeah. Is that it? Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
1 second.
Okay.
Before you take a seat, if you want to give any social media, any books, any upcoming events at Lincoln or otherwise, just to share with the people to stay in contact or learn more.
I am so glad you said that. As you see, if you can see in the camera, I have this chenille. Some people call it a cartouche because they don't know that ancient Kemet was called a chenille. It was a circle, meant that it had no beginning and no end. They called it a cartouche because they thought it looked like a cartridge from a gun. And that's why the French call it a cartouche, but it's a chenille. Know your own language. But it also has my name on here, and underneath, inside of it, it has something that says Older Testament Tour. First time I went to Egypt was with Sudan and Sante and about 30 odd other people. But since I went back a number of times taking tours there, and we name our tour the Older Testament Tour, because some people read the New Testament. A lot of people claim to, they didn't read it. But some people read the New Testament, some read the Old Testament. I wanted to show them where the Older Testament was. And the Older Testament are on those walls in Kemet. And if you can read Medu Neter, you can see where it says, may you live forever. And it says, at the end of the Lord's Prayer, I don't know how many of you know it. My wife told me it's really from the King James Version, but it says forever and ever, amen, at the end of the prayer. If you read the walls and you know how to read Medu Neter, it says, for all time and all space, may you rise like Ra. The Lord's Prayer is right there. So it's the Older Testament tour. And the people that we take on this tour, we try to give them at least a semester of beginning Medu Neter so they're not a slave to the tour guide. And so they can read, so they know what Amen looks like in glyphs. So they know what Ra looks like in glyphs. So they know what for all space looks like in glyphs, for all time looks like in glyphs. We teach them that before we go. And then when we take them on the tour, while we're there, they collect and take pictures of all the glyphs they can. And then we have a session after that where we try to decipher and break down those glyphs and see what's being said. And I can do that because when I was a graduate student at Temple, with Dr. Obenga, I took Medu Neter. And so I learned, but I really didn't learn it much until I began teaching it. And we teach it at the undergrad level in a course called Nile Valley Civilizations. Your children can actually learn it. You just have to start. If you're interested, we're talking about launching a trip next summer, early summer, and I'm supposed to give you the address, email address in case you're interested. It's KEMETOTT@gmail.com. KEMET, that's Kemet, OTT, Older Testament Tour @gmail.com. KEMET. I'm trying to wait till you can get your pen in case you needed it, but I'll tell you anyway. So for the online, KEMETOTT @gmail.com. We're going to take one more trip. I'm going to take at least one more trip there, and it's going to be Older Testament Tour. However, if you decide you want to go with us, we need to know soon because your preparatory classes will start in the spring, or actually after December.
Where class is going to be held?
It'll probably be online, and maybe I'll do a couple of in-person things somewhere for local where I'm at. I'm at Lincoln, so. But there's things you can do online, and there's books I will tell you to get that are easy beginner books. And I would also suggest if you get a chance, pick up any book you can by Tony Browder, because his book as an artist, he doesn't really just write scholarly, he writes artistically. It's full of scholarship, but he also helps you see the glyphs. And there's even a dig that he helped to sponsor in Kemet of the 25th dynasty. And we went when he first did it, and even 10 years later. And now it's getting ready to be closed up because they're going to add some of it into the new opening of the Egyptian Museum. Yeah. Yes.
How do you spell his last name, Tony?
Browder, Browder. And if you have time, he does his organization does a great tour in DC called Egypt on the Potomac. And he shows you how these people are so in love with ancient Africa until they find out it's black. But they were really, I mean, they love Africa. Even the school that I teach at Lincoln University, originally was named Jehudi Ashman. It was Jehudi Ashman. It's named after Jehudi Ashman. Jehudi is one of the deities in ancient Kemet that the Greeks call Thoth. And Ashman is the Ashmoleum in Egypt. So even back then in 1812, because Jehudi Ashman died, I think, in somewhere is in the early 19th century, because he's the first administrator of Liberia. But that's how I know about him. And later on, the campus changed its name to Lincoln University after Abraham Lincoln, the Republican, got shot. Your students don't know, if you teach, they don't know that the Republicans was the Union and that the Democrats were the Confederates. It just shows that they're all really the same thing. They just flip sides whenever needed. Yeah, Dixiecrats. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure that if you're tuning in online, you watch the other lectures on the Mlefe Kete Asante YouTube page. And if you didn't have opportunity so far, definitely check the page out. One of the clips from Dr. Asante discussing the wig room, he talked about being online, has over 100,000 views because his grandson is helping. Like he said, the younger generation is helping us to get the message out and putting it in palatable, smaller clips, and using thumbnails and different headlines and taglines to get the people interested. And it's working well. So let's continue to work together and get this message out and do this good work. Take care, everybody. Hotep. All right.